Well, everybody, this is the Ultimate Issues Hour. This is the hour where we concentrate on wisdom, the most neglected of the great virtues, perhaps the most important of all, because goodness rests on wisdom, not on good intentions. Good intentions without wisdom usually leads to evil. Got that from the favorite book of wisdom, the Bible. We're producing educated morons in the Western world because we think that knowledge is wisdom. So if 20 or 100 Nobel laureates in physics and chemistry, is there one in biology? I don't know. Is there a Nobel Prize in biology? Anyway, yeah, there is as well. Okay, fine. So perfect. So if they take a stance on, let's say, capital punishment, we take it seriously, as if knowledge of physics confers any degree of greater wisdom than being an Uber driver. It's massive confusion of knowledge with wisdom. Well, PhD said, this professor said, but how do you know the professor is wise? Anyway, it's one way of explaining the Ultimate Issues Hour. I'm going to spend this hour reading excerpts to you from the speech given by the Attorney General of the United States, William Barr, this past weekend at Notre Dame University. Technically, it's physiology, the Nobel Prize. Thank you. That was what we call, folks, knowledge. It is what it is. He gave a speech at Notre Dame for which he has been widely attacked, needless to say. I will tell you that this speech is something I could have written. This doesn't take anything away from Mr. Barr. It is just my way of saying it is so in sync with what I believe. Is he a Catholic? I know he's a Christian, but I don't know. I don't know if it's a specific form of Christianity is Catholicism. But of course, he's speaking at a nominally Catholic, and I say nominally because Notre Dame has really become a secular university with a Catholic identity, which is a very sad thing that has happened to a lot of religious institutions. But he is Christian, I'm a Jew, and we have the same exact view on these matters. Exactly the same. I'm not saying on every matter, and obviously we have theological differences or we'd be in the same religion. But in terms of the values, I will read to you from the speech. By the way, he was attacked. Some leftists said he was like Torquemada. Torquemada was the Inquisitor General in the Spanish Inquisition, the torturer-in-chief in the 1490s, for advocating that maybe we should really reconsider secularism. So let me just tell you one overview thing from me. I have said throughout my career, if there's one overriding principle, lesson, that I have tried to impart in all of my 3 decades of broadcasting, and it is the consequences of secularism. I've said that all of my broadcast life. That's really what underlies everything I talk about. That's what he talked about in his speech at Notre Dame. So here come some of the excerpts. In the 21st century, we face an entirely different kind of challenge. In other words, the previous challenges, he said, were external, like fascism and communism. The challenge we face is precisely what the Founding Fathers foresaw would be our supreme test as a free society. They never thought the main danger to the Republic came from external foes. The central question was whether over the long haul we could handle freedom. The question was whether the citizens in such a free society could maintain the moral discipline and virtue necessary for the survival of free institutions. That's correct. That's the question. Can people handle freedom? And the answer is probably not. I have mentioned to you often the human being does not even yearn to be free nearly as much as the human being yearns to be taken care of. Got this one from the Bible too. The Israelites are freed from Egypt, and they immediately start complaining, "We ate better as slaves. Let's go back to Egypt." They had meat there. In the desert, they only had manna. We don't know exactly what that was, but it obviously sustained them. Get that? Better to be a slave eating meat than a free person eating manna. That's the human condition in a nutshell. So I knew that when I was about 10, because I learned wisdom. In secular schools, you learn no wisdom. You learn some facts, increasingly fewer, and much nonsense. Like you will be dead in 12 or 20 years. Like there's no such thing as male and female. Okay, next. By and large, Barr says, the founding generation's view of human nature was drawn from the classical Christian tradition. These practical statesmen understood that individuals, while having the potential for great good, also had the capacity for great evil. Men are subject to powerful passions and appetites, and if unrestrained, are capable of ruthlessly riding roughshod over their neighbors and the community at large. No society can exist without some means for restraining individual rapacity. But if you rely on the coercive power of government to impose restraints, this will inevitably lead to a government that is too controlling, and you will end up with no liberty, just tyranny. That's correct. That's what I've been saying my whole life. Either you will control yourself or the government will control you. But how do you control yourself? If you believe you are responsible to God for your behavior. It is not enough to be responsible to yourself for your behavior. This is the fantasy world of the secular left. I don't need God. But what happens is the state grows because it controls more and more, correct? More and more of your life is controlled by the state as the society gets more secular. That's right. That's inevitable. Inevitable. Because of the breakdown of that which sustained self-control. Namely, responsibility before God. Accountability. Yes, that's the way it works. Okay, that is the first message of William Barr. Next, the founders decided to take a gamble. They called it a great experiment. They would leave the people broad liberty, limit the coercive power of the government, and place their trust in self-discipline and virtue of the American people. In the words of Madison, we have staked our future on the ability of each of us to govern ourselves. That's right. Otherwise, there's chaos. You ever hear me note that there might be forces of chaos in our country? 1-8-Prager-776, the important speech of William Barr at Notre Dame. I'm Dennis Prager.
The Dennis Prager Show.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager. Quick reminder that the ADF banner is up at DennisPrager.com. Alliance Defending Freedom. They're the people who pay for the lawyers in the religious liberty cases and other liberty cases. If we don't support them, these cases don't go to the Supreme Court. There's nobody to defend them. It's as simple as that. By the way, once you get in the habit of giving money to people who deserve it, it becomes a habit. My producer should talk. I should interview you once on the concept of habit, because you've really mastered it more than anyone I know. But it is true. For example, I regularly send to websites that I use. They ask for. I don't think I should take anything for free. It's as simple as that. I'm not great. It's not heroic. It's a good principle to live by, and then you get used to it. There are photography, hobby sites that I go to. I mean, just as an example. Gatestone for news on Europe, and so on. Anyway, ADF. So once you start with good places, and it never hurts you financially, that's the amazing thing. ADF. Okay, so they have a banner at my website. I am reading to you William Barr's speech. It was perfect, practically. As close to perfection as you get. Describing the crisis in the United States and the West. And how the founders believed, as he said, they took a gamble. In the words of Madison, we have staked our future on the ability of each of us to govern ourselves. He realizes, Barr, as I do, I've realized this my whole life. Secularism is great for government and is awful for society. It's as simple as that. To control willful human beings, I continue with this speech, with an infinite capacity to rationalize. That's a great line. An infinite capacity to rationalize. Oh, God, is that true? Those moral values must rest on authority independent of men's will. They must flow from a transcendent supreme being. That's exactly right, folks. Sorry. If they flow from you, then the opposite flows from me, and that ends the issue. Then there is no such thing. If values don't come from something higher than us, then they come from us. So what? So what? In short, in the framers' view, free government was only suitable and sustainable for a religious people. That's why In God We Trust is one of our mottos. It's not a sweet little phrase. It's all dead. Freedom will die without God. That's what is happening. Freedom is dying in America. The secular left is destroying it. By the way, I might as well remind you, No Safe Spaces makes that point. It's a movie Adam Carolla and I are in. It's opening in a week, 10 days, whatever. It's the weekend after this in Phoenix. Thursday is sold out. The others are selling out. Go to nosafespaces.com, and then it will go to other cities and then the entire country. So those of you in Phoenix, I will be there, by the way, on Friday. Up to sunset, anyway, and that's a big day. It's a great movie. It'll blow you out of your seat on the issue of freedom in America. That's right. It's simple as that. It's only suitable and sustainable for religious people. And as Western societies become more secular, more rules govern behavior. More and more rules. Correct, folks? Is that correct? If up to the secular left, they would control everything you do. What straws you drink from. What temperature your house will be. What you will drive or not drive. There is no arena where they will not control your life. The purpose of government, or one of the couple or three major purposes of government for the founders, was to enable you to be free and thereby leave you alone. It was to protect you from those who would take away your liberty. But that was it. Conservatives' motto is leave me alone. I want to take care of myself, my family, and my community. I want to go into my garage and do some woodwork. I want to join with others in the Rotary Club and do some good in the society. Please leave me alone. A people who recognized that there was a transcendent moral order antecedent to both the state and man-made law, and who had the discipline to control themselves according to those enduring principles. As John Adams put it, we have no government armed with the power which is capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Yeah. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. That's right. So they'll get rid of this way of government. Modern secularists dismiss this idea of morality as otherworldly superstition, imposed by a killjoy clergy. In fact, Judeo-Christian moral standards are the ultimate utilitarian rules for human conduct. Right? That's exactly right. They work. That's what utilitarian means. They work. That's why you could be an atheist and understand that we have to live by Judeo-Christian principles. In other words, I continue, religion helps frame moral culture within society that instills and reinforces moral discipline. He's a first-class thinker, this guy. I think we all recognize that over the last 50 years, religion has been under increasing attack. On the one hand, we have seen the steady erosion of our traditional Judeo-Christian moral system and a comprehensive effort to drive it from the public square. Yes, we have. On the other hand, we see the growing ascendancy of secularism and the doctrine of moral relativism. By any honest assessment, the consequences of this moral upheaval have been grim. Virtually every measure of social pathology continues to gain ground. And then he will document the social pathology that has accompanied the death of God and religion in American life. What's wrong with that? Why is that analysis not correct? 1-8-Prager-776.
The Dennis Prager Show.
All right, everybody, you're listening to the Dennis Prager Show. I am reading to you, this is the Ultimate Issues Hour, third hour every Tuesday. I'm reading to you William Barr, the Attorney General's speech at Notre Dame. Just terrific. Well, let me take some calls, though. 1-8-Prager-776-877-243-7776. And let's take Studio City, California, Fred. Hello, Fred.
Oh, hi. Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I got a question for you. Why did you make a movie with Adam Carolla, who's an avowed atheist, but you say that you and him have the same values and morals?
We do.
It doesn't make sense.
Why?
Because atheism is a religion.
No, it's not.
And the logical conclusion...
It's a religion to some atheists. It isn't to Adam Carolla. He agrees with everything. I don't know any value I hold that he doesn't believe in. He just doesn't think they emanate from God because he was raised an atheist and he has never gravitated to That's so what? I'm much closer to him. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, he cannot prove that there isn't a God. Okay, so it's a religion. Atheism.
No. Okay, all right. Forgive me. I'm sure you and I agree on most things. Please, it's very important to to be real in our objections to what we object to. For some atheists, atheism is a religion. For others, it is not a religion at all. They simply don't believe in God. That's it. He's not happy he doesn't believe in God. He doesn't advocate non-belief in God. Now, if he were an atheist activist, it would be we would have a different value system. He's not an activist on behalf of atheism. If 100 religious Jews and Christians interviewed him on his values, they would all go away thinking he's a religious man. If they avoided the one question, do you believe in God, they would think he's a fellow Jew or fellow Christian in terms of values. So it's that's what matters to me. I think that's what matters to God. God will take Adam Carolla much sooner than the Christians and Jews who have made leftism into their religion in the guise of Judaism and Christianity. Michael, Tampa, Florida. Hello, Michael.
Hey, Dennis. Always such a pleasure to talk to you. I really enjoy listening to your show and reading your books. Hey, you kind of just answered my question. I'm so sorry. I'm glad that call came before me because I'm like you. I actually agree with you in terms of, like, for a good society, we should hold the Judeo-Christian values. Absolutely 100% agree. But, I even have people in my own family who are agnostics and atheists and even spiritual, type of New Age. And I was just wondering, like, how do we go about advocating our values, but at the same time being tolerant and accepting, because we all don't come to the same conclusions. We live in a free society, and I just feel like there's a lot of people pitted against one another. I think about one time I watched you, and one of the great advocates for their side, Christopher Hitchens. I mean, at the end of the day, he seemed like he was very tolerant about the fact that you can be religious. He just had a difference of opinion and wanted to.
Yes, that's fine. Yes, absolutely. Although he was an advocative atheist in that sense. We didn't share a value system, but I respected Christopher Hitchens. There's some YouTube video of a debate. I think there were three of us. I think Dinesh D'Souza, Christopher Hitchens, and myself. And I had him on my radio show. I'll tell you an interesting story, though, about Christopher Hitchens. I asked Christopher Hitchens a question that I have asked my whole life. Imagine you are in a rental car in a strange city, in other words, city you've never been to. Midnight, car breaks down. You see 10 men walking toward you. Would you or would you not be relieved to know they had just attended a Bible class? He changed my question in his autobiography to, would you be relieved if they attended a religious prayer service? I'll tell you what the difference means when we come back. All right, I'll take more of your calls after I finish the William Barr speech, excerpts of which I am reading to you. I'm Dennis Prager. This is the Ultimate Issues Hour. His speech this past weekend at Notre Dame. We see the growing ascendancy of secularism and the doctrine of moral relativism. By any honest assessment, the consequences of this moral upheaval have been grim. Virtually every measure of social pathology continues to gain ground. In 1965, the illegitimacy rate was 8%. I could cry.
It's worth tears.
It is worth tears. Folks, you ask what Make America Great Again is? Just give this example. Just this. In 1965, the illegitimacy rate was 8%. I boldened it to read on the air, and I didn't realize It didn't hit me like it's hitting me now. Anyway, I continue. In 1992, when I was last Attorney General, it was 25%. Today, it is over 40%. In many of our large urban areas, it is around 70%. Along with the wreckage of the family, we see record levels of depression and mental illness, dispirited young people, soaring suicide rates, increasing numbers of angry and alienated young males, an increase in senseless violence, and a deadly drug epidemic. I will not dwell on all the bitter results of a new secular age. Suffice it to say that the campaign to destroy the traditional moral order has brought with it immense suffering, wreckage, and misery. And yet the forces of secularism, ignoring these tragic results, press on with even greater militancy. Among these militant secularists are many so-called progressives. But where is the progress? What a great line. We are told we are living in a post-Christian era, but what has replaced the Judeo-Christian moral system? What is it that can fill the spiritual void in the hearts of the individual person? And what is a system of values that can sustain human social life? The fact is, no secular creed has emerged capable of performing the role of religion. Well, I would amend that, the positive role of religion. Many secular creeds have replaced religion. Marxism, communism, humanism, environmentalism, feminism. Oh, let me tell you, we've got a lot of secular religions. But they wreak havoc. We hear much today about our humane values, but in the final analysis, what undergirds these values? What commands our adherence to them? What we call values today is really nothing more than mere sentimentality, still drawing on the vapor trails of Christianity. That is all correct. Or what I have called, which I read, cut flower ethics. When you remove flowers from the soil that nurtured them, people can say, look, they don't need the soil. The flower looks fine. But eventually it withers and dies. That's the case with ethics. They were nurtured in Judeo-Christian soil. Take them from that soil, they will wither too. Today we face something different that may mean that we cannot count on the pendulum swinging back. First is the force, fervor, and comprehensiveness of the assault on religion we are experiencing today. This is not decay. It is organized destruction. Correct. Secularists and their allies among the progressives have marshaled all the force of mass communications, popular culture, the entertainment industry, and academia in an unremitting assault on religion and traditional values. These instruments are used not only to affirmatively promote secular orthodoxy, but also drown out and silence opposing voices. Oh, is that ever true? And to attack viciously and hold up to ridicule any dissenters. It's all ridicule. You heard Elizabeth Warren last hour ridiculing a man who might say that he believes in one man, one woman as marriage. One of the ironies of some have observed is that the secular project has itself become a religion. Pursued with religious fervor, it is taking on all the trappings of a religion, including inquisitions and excommunications. Today, in the face of all the increasing pathologies, this is so good, this part now, listen. Instead of addressing the underlying cause, we have the state in the role of alleviator of bad consequences. This is a terrific speech. This is like Solzhenitsyn at Harvard. We call on the state to mitigate the social costs of personal misconduct and irresponsibility. So the reaction to growing illegitimacy is not sexual responsibility, but abortion. The reaction to drug addiction is safe injection sites. The solution to the breakdown of the family is for the state to set itself up as the ersatz husband for single mothers and the ersatz father to their children. Hey, a reminder before we wrap up here, and stay on, I'm going to take a call or two. On AMAC, Association of Mature American Citizens, and people join AARP automatically because it's so famous. When they turn 50, they want all those benefits. Well, you get the benefits at AMAC, but you're not joining an organization of the left. You're joining an organization which has the values that I advocate and that many of you do. Many of you who are listening are on the left. AARP is for you. You're not on the left. AMAC is for you. Go to Prager for AMAC. They're a big sponsor. If for nothing else, support them because talk radio is pretty important. PragerforAMAC.com is the place for you to go. Craig in Chicago, hello.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi.
I want to say thank you so much. I stumbled upon you about 5-7 years ago, and, I said to a friend of mine, I wish I would have had a rabbi when I was young, such as you. I think I would have never fallen so far to the left as I did growing up. I grew up in Chicago, which I don't need to tell you about Chicago. And I went to a very radical high school that was extremely far left. And, you and a person by the name of Dr. Wattenberg were two people that I really credit so much for helping me awaken to look at things in a different way. And I cannot thank you enough for your Torah teachings. I have not gone through all of them. I'm only about 60 hours in. And I'm just...
Good. Well, you're welcome. Listen, we gotta go right away. I'm very touched. It's very important. I just want to say to all those, and I mean this, I don't say what I don't mean. People tell me, thank God, often that I have deeply affected them and so on, and I am proud of doing so and thrilled that I did. But they get half the credit. That anyone who has the mind to be opened to ideas they don't agree with, find them more rationally and morally convincing, they get a lot of credit for that. That's also important. By the way, going to Israel in December. Final sign-ups. Stand for Israel banner is at my website. And I will see you tomorrow.
The Dennis Prager Show, live from the Relief Factor Pain-Free Studio.
Your Honors, Your Excellency, friends from the Notre Dame community. When my daughter Meg, after she graduated and ultimately went to law school, she became very ill for a period of time, and I knew there were great kids at Notre Dame, people of great character, and for a long period of time there was always one of her classmates visiting us. They worked it out so there was always someone coming to visit us while she was being treated in the hospital and so forth. And we got very close to all her friends, and we loved them to death. And Notre Dame will always have a special place in my heart because of that. And I have 5 grandchildren now with another on the way, and I'd be very proud if they all end up at Notre Dame. Meg, incidentally, recovered and got married recently. She got married on December 8th, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. And the day before, I got a call from the president who was walking out to the helicopters, and he said, "Bill, I know we talked about putting the announcement off until after your daughter's wedding, but I'd sort of like to do it today if it's okay with you, but it's totally up to you." And I said, "Well, Mr. President, we talked about it, and whatever suits you, we'll adjust to. That'll be fine." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll do it now while I'm walking out to the helicopters." So I turned on I was, lounging around in my study at home, and I turned on the television, and it was sort of the first of a number of outer body experiences I've had since then. Because he walks over and he goes, "I'm selecting Bill Barr to be Attorney General of the United States." And that was the day before, that was Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, and the next day was my daughter's wedding, and she said to me, "Pop, you're the only guy I know who would upstage his daughter at her wedding." But when I gave the toast, I said, "Meg, it's okay, because just as the Barr name is going to be dragged through the mud, you're changing your name to McGaughey." Today I would like to share some thoughts with you about religious liberty in America. It's an important priority in this administration and for this Department of Justice. We've set up a task force within the department in which all the various components that have equities in this area, the Solicitor General's office, the Civil Division, the Office of Legal Counsel, and other offices are all represented. And we have regular meetings, and we keep an eye out for cases or events around the country where states are misapplying the Establishment Clause in a way that discriminates against people of faith, or cases where states adopt laws that impinge upon the free exercise of religion. From the founding era onward, there was strong consensus about the centrality of religious liberty in the United States. The imperative of protecting religious freedom was not just a nod in the direction of piety. It reflects the framers' belief that religion was indispensable to sustaining our free system of government. In his renowned 1785 pamphlet, Memorial and Remonstrance Against Religious Assessments, James Madison described religious liberty as a right towards men, but a duty towards the Creator, and a duty precedent, both in order of time and degree of obligation, to the claims of civil society. It has been over 230 years since that small group of colonial lawyers led a revolution and launched what they viewed as a great experiment, establishing a society fundamentally different than anything that had come before. They crafted a magnificent charter of freedom, the United States Constitution, which provides for limited government while leaving the people broadly at liberty to pursue their lives both as individuals and through their free associations. This quantum leap in liberty has been the mainspring of unprecedented human progress, not only for Americans, but for people around the world. In the 20th century, our form of free society faced a severe test. There's always been the question whether a democracy so solicitous of individual freedom could stand up against the regimented totalitarian state. That question was answered with a resounding yes, as the United States stood up against and defeated first fascism and then communism. But in the 21st century, we face an entirely different kind of challenge. The challenge we face is precisely what the Founding Fathers foresaw would be the supreme test of a free society. They never thought that the main danger to the Republic would come from external foes. The central question was whether, over the long haul, we the people could handle freedom. The question was whether the citizens in such a free society could maintain the moral discipline and virtue necessary for the survival of free institutions. By and large, the founding generation's view of human nature was drawn from the classical Christian tradition. These practical statesmen understood that individuals, while having the potential for great good, also had the capacity for great evil. Men are subject to powerful passions and appetites, and if unrestrained, are capable of ruthlessly riding roughshod over their neighbors and the community at large. No society can exist without some means of restraining individual rapacity. But if you rely on the coercive power of the government to impose those restraints, the framers believed, this would inevitably lead to a government that is too controlling, and you would end up with no liberty, just tyranny. On the other hand, unless you had some effective restraint, you end up with something equally dangerous: licentiousness, the unbridled pursuit of personal appetites at the expense of the common good. This is just another form of tyranny, where the individual is enslaved by his appetites and the possibility of any healthy community life crumbles. Edmund Burke summed up this point in his typically colorful language. Men are qualified for civil liberty in exact proportion to their disposition to put chains upon their own appetites. Society cannot exist unless a controlling power be placed somewhere, and the less of it there is within, the more of it there must be without. It is ordained in the eternal constitution of things that men of intemperate minds cannot be free. Their passions forge their fetters. So the founders decided to take a gamble, and they called it a great experiment. They would leave the people broad liberty, they would limit the coercive power of the government, and they would place their trust in the self-discipline and virtue of the American people. In the words of Madison, we have staked our future on the ability of each of us to govern ourselves. And this is really what they meant by self-government. It did not mean primarily the mechanics by which we select a representative legislature. It referred to the capacity of each individual to restrain and govern themselves. But what was the source of this internal controlling power? In a free republic, those restraints could not be handed down from above by philosopher kings. Instead, social order must flow up from the people themselves, freely obeying the dictates of inwardly possessed and commonly shared moral values. And to control willful human beings with an infinite capacity to rationalize, those moral values must rest on authority independent of men's wills. They must flow from the transcendent supreme being. In short, in the framers' view, free government was only suitable and sustainable for a religious people, a people who recognized that there was a transcendent moral order antecedent to both the state and to man-made laws, and had the discipline to control themselves according to those enduring principles. As John Adams put it, we have no government armed with the power which is capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. And as Father John Courtney Murray observed, the American tenet was not that free government is inevitable, only that it is possible, and that its possibility can be realized only when the people as a whole are inwardly governed by the recognized imperatives of the universal moral order. Well, how does religion promote moral discipline and the virtue needed to sustain free government? Well, first, it gives us rules to live by. The founding generation were Christians, and they believed that the Judeo-Christian moral system corresponds to the true nature of man. And those rules speak to man and fulfill man both in his private spiritual life and in his communal life. Those moral precepts start, of course, in Christianity with the two great commandments, to love God with your whole heart, soul, and mind, and to love thy neighbor as thyself. But they also include the guidance of natural law, a real transcendent moral order which flows from God's eternal law, the divine wisdom by which the whole of creation is ordered. The eternal law is impressed upon and reflected in all created things. And from the nature of things we can, through reason and experience, discern standards of right and wrong that exist independent of human will. Now, modern secularists dismiss this idea of morality as sort of otherworldly superstition imposed by a killjoy clergy. But in fact, Judeo-Christian moral standards are the ultimate utilitarian rules for human conduct. They reflect the rules that are best for man, not in the by and by, but in the here and now. They are like God's instruction manual for the best running of man and the best operation of human society. And by the same token, violations of these moral laws have bad real-world consequences for man and for society. We may not pay the price immediately, but over time, the harm is real. Religion also helps promote moral discipline within society. We're all fallen. We don't automatically conform our conduct to moral rules, even when we know that they are good for us. But religion helps teach, train, and habituate people to want what is good. It does not do this primarily by formal laws, that is, by coercive power. It does this through moral education and by framing society's informal rules, the customs and traditions which reflect the wisdom and experience of the ages. In other words, religion helps frame a moral culture within society that instills and reinforces moral discipline. I think we all recognize, that over the past 50 years, religion has been under increasing attack. On the one hand, we have seen the steady erosion of our traditional Judeo-Christian moral system and a comprehensive effort to drive it from the public square. On the other hand, we see the growing ascendancy of secularism and the doctrine of moral relativism. By any honest assessment, the consequences of this moral upheaval have been grim. Virtually every measure of social pathology continues to gain ground. In 1965, the illegitimacy rate was 8%. The last time I was Attorney General, in 1992, it was at 25%. Today, it is at over 40%, and that's the national average. In many of our large urban areas, as we know, it is well over 70%. Along with the wreckage of the family, we are seeing record levels of depression and mental illness, dispirited young people, soaring suicide rates, increasing numbers of angry and alienated young males, an increase in senseless violence, and a deadly drug epidemic. As you know, over 70,000 people die a year from drug overdoses. That is more casualties in a year than we experienced during the entire Vietnam War. I won't dwell on the bitter results of the new secular age. Suffice it to say that the campaign to destroy the traditional moral order has coincided, and I believe has brought with it immense suffering and misery. And yet the forces of secularism, ignoring these tragic results, press on with even greater militancy. Among the militant secularists are many so-called progressives. But where is the progress? We are told we are living in a post-Christian era. But what has replaced the Judeo-Christian moral system? What is it that can fill the spiritual void in the hearts of the individual person? And what is the system of values that can sustain human social life? The fact is that no secular creed has emerged capable of performing the role of religion. Scholarship suggests that religion has been integral to the development and thriving of Homo sapiens since we emerged roughly 50,000 years ago. And it is just for the past few hundred years that we've embarked on this experiment of living without religion. We hear much today about our humane values, but in the final analysis, what undergirds these values? What commands our adherence to them? What we call values today is really nothing more than mere sentimentality, still drawing on the vapor trails of Christianity. Now, there have been times and places where the traditional moral order has been shaken in the past. In the past, societies like the human body seem to have a self-healing mechanism, a self-correcting mechanism that gets things back on course if things go too far. The consequences of moral chaos become too pressing. The opinion of decent people rebels. They coalesce and rally against obvious excess. Periods of moral retrenchment follow periods of excess. This is the idea of the pendulum. And we've all thought to ourselves, after a while, the pendulum will swing back. But today we face something different that may mean that we cannot count on the pendulum swinging back. First is the force, fervor, and comprehensiveness of the assault on organized religion we are experiencing today. This is not decay. This is organized destruction. Secularists and their allies have marshaled all the forces of mass communication, popular culture, the entertainment industry, and academia in an unremitting assault on religion and traditional values. These instruments are used not only to affirmatively promote secular orthodoxy, but also to drown out and silence opposing voices and to attack viciously and hold up to ridicule any dissidents. One of the ironies, as some have observed, is that the secular project has itself become a religion, pursued with religious fervor. It is taking on all the trappings of religion, including inquisitions and excommunication. Those who defy the creed risk a figurative burning at the stake, social, educational, and professional ostracism, and exclusion waged through lawsuits and savage social media campaigns. The pervasiveness and the power of our high-tech popular culture fuels apostasy in other ways. It provides an unprecedented degree of distraction. Part of the human condition has been that there usually has been no way to avoid the big questions that stare us in the face. Are we created, or are we purely material accidents? Does our life have any meaning or purpose? But as Blaise Pascal observed, instead of grappling with these questions, many human beings are easily distracted from thinking about the final things. And indeed, we now live in the age of distraction, where we can envelop ourselves in a world of digital stimulation and universal connectivity. And we have almost limitless ways of indulging all our physical appetites. There's another modern phenomenon that is suppressing society's self-corrective mechanism that's making it harder for us to restore ourselves. In the past, when societies are threatened by moral chaos, the overall social costs, of licentiousness and irresponsible personal conduct becomes so high that society ultimately recoils and reevaluates the path it is on. But today, in the face of all the increasing pathologies, instead of addressing the underlying cause, we have cast the state in the role of the alleviator of bad consequences. We call on the state to mitigate the social costs of personal misconduct and irresponsibility. So the reaction to growing illegitimacy is not sexual responsibility, but abortion. The reaction to drug addiction is safe injection sites. The solution to the breakdown of the family is for the state to set itself up as an ersatz husband for the single mother and an ersatz father for the children. The call comes for more and more social programs to deal with this wreckage. And while we think we're solving problems, we are underwriting them. We start with an untrammeled freedom, and we end up as dependents of a coercive state on whom we depend. Interestingly, this idea of the state as the alleviator of bad consequences has given rise to a new moral system that goes hand in hand with the secularization of society. It can be called a system of macro-morality, and in some ways it is an inversion of Christian morality. Christianity teaches a micro-morality. We transform the world by focusing on our own personal morality and transformation. The new secular religion teaches macro-morality. One's morality is not gauged by their private conduct, but rather their commitment to political causes and collective action to address various social problems. This system allows us not to worry so much about the strictures on our own private lives, because we can find salvation on the picket line. We can signal our finely tuned moral sensibilities by participating in demonstrations on this cause or on that. Something happened recently that crystallized this difference between these competing moral systems. I was attending Mass at a parish I did not usually attend in Washington, D.C. And at the end of Mass, the chairman of the Social Justice Committee got up to give his report to the parish. And he pointed to the growing homeless problem in D.C. and explained that more mobile soup kitchens were needed to feed them. This being a Catholic church, I expected him to call for volunteers to go out and provide for this need as volunteers. But instead, he recounted all the visits that the committee members had made to the D.C. government to lobby for higher taxes and more spending to fund mobile soup kitchens. A third phenomenon which makes it difficult for the pendulum to swing back is the way the law is being used as a battering ram to break down traditional moral values and to establish moral relativism as the new orthodoxy. Law is being used in a couple of ways. First, either through legislation, but more frequently through judicial interpretation. The forces of secularism have been continually seeking to eliminate laws that reflect traditional moral norms. At first, this involved rolling back laws that prohibited certain kinds of conduct, hence the watershed decision legalizing abortion, and since then the legalization of euthanasia, and the list goes on, as we all know. More recently, we have seen the law used aggressively to force religious people and entities to subscribe to practices and policies that are antithetical to their faith. The problem is not that religion is being forced on others. The problem is that irreligion is being forced. Secular values are being forced on people of faith. This reminds me of the way Roman emperors just couldn't leave the minority of Christians in the empire alone, although they were loyal to the emperor. They couldn't leave them in peace. They would mandate that they had to violate their conscience by offering religious sacrifice to the emperor as a god. Similarly today, militant secularists do not have a live and let live spirit. They are not content to leave religious people alone to practice their faith. Instead, they seem to take delight in compelling people to violate their conscience. For example, the last administration sought to force religious employers, including Catholic religious orders, to violate their sincerely held religious views by funding contraceptive and abortifacient coverage in their health plans. And similarly, recently, California has sought to require pro-life pregnancy centers to provide notices of abortion rights. This refusal to accommodate the free exercise of religion is relatively recent. Just 25 years ago, there was a broad consensus in our society that our laws should accommodate religious belief. In 1993, Congress passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The purpose of the statute was to promote maximum accommodation to religion when the government adopted broad policies that might impinge on religious practice. And at the time, this was not controversial. It was introduced by Chuck Schumer with 170 co-sponsors in the House, and was introduced by Ted Kennedy and Orrin Hatch with 59 co-sponsors in the Senate, and it passed the Senate by 97-3. But recently, as the process of secularization has accelerated, this statute has come under assault, and the idea of religious accommodation is falling out of favor. Because this administration firmly supports accommodation of religion, the battleground at this time has largely shifted to the states. Some state governments are now attempting to compel religious individuals and entities to subscribe to practices or to espouse viewpoints that are incompatible with their religion. Ground zero for these attacks on religion are the schools, and to me, this is the most serious challenge to religious liberty today. For anyone who has a religious faith, by far the most important part of exercising that faith is teaching that religion to your children, the passing on of the faith. There is no greater gift we can give our children and no greater expression of love. And for the government to interfere in that process is a monstrous invasion of religious liberty. Yet, this is where the battle is being joined, and I see that is being waged on three fronts. The first front relates to the content of public school curriculum. Many states are adopting curriculum that is incompatible with traditional Judeo-Christian principles, according to which parents are attempting to raise their children. And they often do this without any opt-out provision for religious families. Thus, for example, New Jersey recently passed a law requiring public schools to adopt an LGBT curriculum that many feel is inconsistent with traditional Christian teaching. Similar laws have been passed in California and Illinois. And the Orange County Board of Education in California issued an opinion that, quote, parents who disagree with the instructional material related to gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation may not excuse their children from this instruction. Indeed, in some cases, the schools may not even warn parents about the lessons they plan to teach on controversial subjects relating to sexual behavior and relationships. This puts parents who dissent from the secular orthodoxy to a difficult choice. Try to scrape together enough money to send their kids to private school or homeschooling, or allow their children to be inculcated with messages that they fundamentally reject. The second axis of attack in the realm of education are state policies designed to starve religious schools of generally available funds and encouraging students to choose secular options rather than religious schools. Montana, for example, created a program that provided tax credits to those who donated to a scholarship program that underprivileged students could use to attend private schools. The point of the program was to provide a greater parental and student choice in education and to provide better education to needy youth. But Montana expressly excluded religious-affiliated private schools from the program. And when that exclusion was challenged in courts by parents who wanted to use the scholarship to attend a non-denominational Christian school, the Montana Supreme Court required the state to eliminate the entire program rather than to allow parents to use the scholarships for religious schools. It justified this action by pointing to a provision in the Montana Constitution commonly referred to as the Blaine Amendment. Blaine amendments, as many of you know, were passed at a time of rampant anti-Catholic animus in this country and typically disqualify religious institutions from receiving any direct or indirect payment from state funds. The case is now in the Supreme Court, and the Department of Justice has filed a brief explaining why Montana's Blaine Amendment violates the First Amendment. Finally, the third kind of assault on religious freedom in education have been recent efforts to use state laws to force religious schools to adhere to secular orthodoxy. For example, right here in Indiana, a teacher sued the Catholic Archbishop of Indianapolis for directing the Catholic schools within his diocese that they could not employ teachers in same-sex marriages because the example of those same-sex marriages would undermine the school's teaching on the Catholic view of marriage and the complementarity of the sexes. This lawsuit clearly infringes on the First Amendment rights of the Archdiocese by interfering both with its expressive association and with its church autonomy. And the Department of Justice filed a statement of interest in the state court making these points, and we hope that the state court will soon dismiss this case. Taken together, these cases paint a disturbing picture. We see the state requiring local public schools to insert themselves into contentious social debates without regard to the religious views of their students or parents. In effect, these states are requiring local communities to make their public schools inhospitable to families with traditional religious values. Those families are implicitly told that they should conform or leave. At the same time, pressure is placed on religious schools to abandon their religious convictions. Simply because of their religious character, they are starved of funds. Students who would otherwise choose to attend them are told that they may only receive scholarships if they turn their sights elsewhere. And simultaneously, the religious schools are threatened in tort cases and undoubtedly will be threatened with the denial of accreditation if they adhere to their religious character. If these measures are successful, those with religious convictions will become still more marginalized. I do not mean to suggest that there is no hope for moral renewal in our country. But we cannot sit back and just hope that the pendulum is going to swing back towards sanity. As Catholics, we are committed to the Judeo-Christian values that have made this country great. And we know that the first thing we have to do to promote this renewal is to ensure that we are putting our principles into practice in our own personal lives. We understand that only by transforming ourselves will we transform the world beyond ourselves. This is tough work. It's hard to resist the constant seductions of contemporary society, and this is where we need the grace and prayer and the help of the Church. Beyond this, we must place greater emphasis on the moral education of our children. Education is not vocational training. It is leading our children to the recognition that there is truth and helping them develop the facility to discern and love the truth and the discipline to live by it. We cannot have a moral renaissance unless we succeed in passing to the next generation our faith and values in full vigor. The times are hostile to this. Public agencies, including public schools, are becoming secularized and increasingly actively promoting moral relativism. If ever there was a need for a resurgence of Catholic education and more generally religiously affiliated schools, it is today. I think we should do all we can to promote and support authentic Catholic education at all levels. Finally, as lawyers, we should be particularly active in the struggle that is being waged against religion on the legal plane. We must be vigilant to resist efforts by forces of secularization to drive religious viewpoints from the public square and to impinge upon our exercise of our faith. I can assure you that as long as I am Attorney General, the Department of Justice will be at the forefront of this effort, ready to fight for the most cherished of all our American liberties, the freedom to live according to our faith. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today, and God bless you and Notre Dame.